In the summer of 2004, I moved into a Victorian house on the outskirts of London. The house sat tucked away on a quiet tree-lined street in Highgate. From the outside, it had ivory-covered walls and windows framed with creeping vines. The real estate agent had warned me that the house was a bit drafty, but I put this down to the quirks of an old house. Besides, the rent was surprisingly affordable, almost suspiciously so. But being a young professional in London, I was eager to save a bit of money. The idea of the house being haunted did not cross my mind, even as I noted how unusual the low price seemed. I did not know about the haunting reputation of Highgate, especially Highgate Cemetery. After my experience, I did some research, and that was when I learnt about the paranormal sightings many people have witnessed inside and around the cemetery, including the now famous Highgate vampire case which happened in the 70s. It was the little things at first. I would hear creaking footsteps on the stairs, despite being the only person in the house. I put this down to the house being very old, or just my imagination. The kitchen lights would flicker now and then, but again, it's an old house. These things happen, I told myself. But as time passed, dismissing these moments became harder. I began to experience colder patches around the house, especially in the early hours of the morning. The air felt thick, almost as though it was pressing against my skin. My friends, while visiting, started noticing it too. "Your house is giving me the creeps," one of them joked, but his tone suggested he was only half joking. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a series of disturbing encounters that would escalate over the months. One night, I awoke to the sound of whispering. It was faint at first, a murmur. I thought it was coming from the street outside, but when I strained to listen, I realized it was inside the room, pressing against my ears. It sounded like soft voices speaking over each other. My heart raced as I lay frozen, too terrified to move. After what felt like an eternity, the whispering ceased, leaving an eerie silence that felt almost louder in its wake. As time went on, I began noticing in the corner of my eye shadows moving, and I would turn to look and nothing would be there. One evening, while sitting in the living room, I saw what looked like a faint outline of a figure standing at the edge of the hallway. I felt it watching me, its gaze cold and heavy. When I turned on the light, the figure vanished, but the sensation of being watched lingered, following me from room to room. I started sleeping with the lights on, hoping that would keep whatever it was at bay. The house had a basement and I rarely went down there, but I felt compelled to go down to the basement one day, despite every fibre of my being screaming to stay away. The basement had always had a strange atmosphere, with its cold, damp air and walls that seemed to hold secrets. As I descended the creaky stairs, I was overcome with a feeling of dread. It was as if I was not alone in that dark, narrow space. I was standing in the middle of the basement when suddenly the light went out and the basement door slammed shut. Suddenly, I felt I was not alone. I started to hear sounds like tapping on the concrete walls and then footsteps. Then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. At that moment, I ran. Luckily, I could see the light from the hallway from under the closed door, so I headed for the light. I started running up the stairs. A few times I lost my footing, but I managed to reach the top. At first, the door would not open. My heart was racing as I tried to open the door, but the door would not move. I started to panic as I heard what sounded like someone climbing the stairs behind me. I did the only thing I could do. I screamed. I shouted for whatever it was to leave me alone. Suddenly, the light came back on, and the door opened. After that, I never went back down to the basement. In the following weeks, my health began to decline. I became constantly tired, plagued by intense nightmares in which I was trapped in the house, unable to escape. Every night, I would wake up drenched in sweat. my heart pounding as though I had just run a marathon. My friends grew concerned, noticing the dark circles under my eyes and my increasingly frail appearance. The final straw came one night. I had gone to bed around midnight and quickly drifted into a deep sleep. I woke suddenly, though I couldn't tell why. My room was cloaked in darkness, the dim outline of furniture barely visible in the faint glow from the streetlight outside. Something felt wrong, a thick, oppressive weight in the air. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't respond. It was then I saw her. She stood at the foot of my bed, her long grey hair hanging in matted strands over her shoulders. Her face was pale, almost skeletal, with hollow sunken eyes that burned with anger. Her lips twisted into a sneer as she glared down at me, and I could feel the rage emanating from her like a cold wave. I was frozen. My limbs felt like they were encased in cement. No matter how much I willed myself to move, my body refused to obey. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I could do nothing but lie there, staring in silent terror as she moved closer. She glided rather than walked, her movements unnaturally smooth. Her hand reached out with bony fingers, tipped with jagged nails, and though she never physically touched me, I felt a cold, intense, icy pressure on my chest. It was as if her fury alone was enough to suffocate me. As she leaned over me, her face just inches away from mine, I could feel her breath, which was cold and damp. I closed my eyes, praying it was a nightmare, that I would wake up at any moment. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. That was my last night in the house. I moved out the following day, leaving behind most of my belongings, too afraid that whatever haunted the house would follow me. It's been years since I left that place, but the memories still haunt me. Occasionally I dream of the house, its shadowed hallways and icy grip that held me captive in the dark. I've since learned that no one stays there for long. Tenants come and go, leaving just as quickly as they arrived. You know the saying, if something is too good to be true, then it usually is, and that was the case with this house.